I'm sure many of you have heard of Chris Watts. I've mentioned in other videos that one of my hobbies is watching true crime on YouTube. And Chris Watts is the one that stands out amongst all of them. Even though some of the people who have been killed have been killed in worse ways than he killed his wife and children. I think it's because they showed so many home videos. The wife, I never forget the wife, she was sitting at home with Chris in the background playing with the children, and she was talking into the video that she was making of herself, and she was saying before she met Chris her life was spiralling down, and if it wasn't for him coming and saving her, she doesn't know where she would end up. In other words, she could have killed herself. She was so depressed. And as I said, you could see him playing in the background, and he never ever showed any signs of violence. And normally you can look at a man and think this man is capable of terrible violence, but not with Chris. Not with Chris. And even now, when I look at the man, knowing that what he's done, I find it terribly difficult to see any violence in him, any hatred. It's really weird. But there are again a lot of these types who do terrible things to women. That's how they're able to get women into places, into the home, etc., away from everyone else, so they can do their terrible deeds. But I never forget, he was driving along, and his two daughters were in the back, and one of them, who was 4 years of age, she made a poem. It was about her father, how nice he was, and how he took care of her. And I never forget the last few words. It was, and he even does my shoelaces up. And I love him so much. And now this man has heard this. And yet we all know that a few months later, he's murdered that girl and her sister, who was 3 years of age. And the mother, of course. I think you can't believe whatever he says, because people who murder people, especially in that situation, where they murder the family, they know they're hated by people, so they're always making excuses, making reasons why they did it. I don't think it was planned. If you look at the situation, it was all done very quickly. I don't think it was planned at all. I think he felt dissatisfied because he was in love with this other woman, the lover, and I don't blame him. I mean, that other woman is gorgeous. And I think they started arguing when the wife got home. You see her on the camera, the door camera, coming home. I think she arrived home about 2:30 in the morning, and I reckon they started arguing. And because he resented her, because he saw her as a thorn in his side, because if he had left her legally, she would have taken the house and taken a huge amount of his pay every month. And that's what he saw. The way I see it, so what if he was earning good money? He could afford to give a lot of his pay to the family until the daughters are 18 years of age, and he still would have had that girl. That girl wasn't with him for money, she was with him for love, the lover. So yeah, they had an argument when she arrived home. He resented her for quite a few weeks now, being married to her, not sure how to sort the situation out, that even though he was going for a divorce, he wasn't happy about it. And he killed her on the spur of the moment. And then he just thought, because he's of that mind, that that coldness that can come into people. Any human can behave like that. Look at the war years. People on both sides, England and Japan and the Germans, everyone done terrible, terrible things to men, women and children. Whether it was dropping bombs on cities and killing them from a distance, or bayoneting people to death. All sides did terrible things. So you can see that humans, especially men, have a certain side of their nature where they can do the most diabolical things and kill children without guilt. Well, of course, there wasn't a war situation going on with Chris, but as far as he was concerned, this was the enemy. His wife became the enemy. His children became the enemy because his children would be taking his money, and he wanted to go to his new lover free of all that. So he killed her without thinking, and it only takes, 3 minutes to strangle a woman. And then he thought, well, I've got rid of her, I'm going to go and kill the kids. He tried to say that the kids came in and saw what had happened, so he had to kill them as well, which is nonsense. If you love your children, it doesn't matter if they've seen you kill the wife. You're not going to kill the kids. No, he killed the kids because he just saw them blocking his path to his lover, to his future life. As I say, I know it seems cold, but people do that. That's another side of human nature, which we saw in the war. Now, what makes it so personal as well is all these people with cameras, their phone cameras and everything, and they're all, straight away, as soon as he's killed them, they're calling the police and saying, what's happened to the wife? Where's the children? The car's still here. And you're seeing the whole thing through movies that they've taken. And you're seeing his behaviour when he's watching the movie that the next door neighbour took on his security camera. And all that makes it very personal. So don't believe all this crap that you hear. Eventually Chris is telling the truth of what happened that night. He's not. Whatever he says is trying to deflect the guilt from him. After all, he's hated in prison. I mean, if they get a chance, they will do terrible things to him, and deservedly so. Well, that's what I wanted to say. Don't believe what they're telling you, that he is telling the truth. He's never going to tell the truth. But what I've just told you about him is probably the truth. And just a reminder, if you like my videos, please give me a thumbs up and hit the subscribe button. Thank you. And look, when you think about it, we got vivisection, factory farming and slaughterhouses. This is our society. It's built on these things. How can you ever expect a decent society to come from the blood of such foundations that our society is based on? It's not going to happen. Get rid of all that slaughterhouses and the rest and the vivisection, and then you can start to think about building a decent society which is based on care. So Chris wouldn't have done it in that situation. Well, as I'm talking about violence, I might as well carry on to the next part of the video. And I like to talk about the gang violence, or the violence in youth, of teenagers especially. When I say teenagers, we're not talking about children anymore. They've turned pubescent, and that's what makes them very dangerous. They've got all these hormones going through their body, and also they want to get away from the family. They're not willing to take orders anymore from mother and father. They don't look up to them anymore. They see themselves as equals to the parents, if not even above the parents, because they see them as fuddy-duddies, if anything. So that's why a lot of teenagers don't listen. And people just don't understand this, because they're still trying to teach. They're still trying to behave towards a teenager as they would a child. You can't. Teenager is a young human, a young woman, a young man. Remember, I've said this in other videos, a child is someone who cannot physically have children, whether it's a boy or a girl. It's only when they become pubescent, then they can have children. That is a young grown up. Now, if we can accept those facts, we can get somewhere. I found in life, if you're not doing anything and boredom sets in, and especially if you're a teenager, they're going to start doing wrong. And if they're a boy, they're going to start doing violence and stealing, crime, etc. It's going to be negative. Whatever happens, they're going to be negative. You've got to keep a young mind, a young grown-up's mind, busy. And that means keep them in work. If you look at all these thugs and these people who are selling drugs, none of them are working. Not a proper job anyway. They're working selling drugs, but not have a proper job. So if officially you give them a proper job, and don't ask them to go out and get a job, you give them a job. And if they don't turn up for work, you want to find out if they're really ill. And you get someone to check up to see if they're really ill. But the chances are no one's that ill not to go to work. You can go to work virtually every day when you're supposed to. So if you keep these young adults, as I've said, in work 5 or 6 days a week, hard work, you can create work. Get them to break rocks if you have to, like on the chain gang, like they used to in America, or become coal miners. Get them to do all these hard jobs, so at the end of the day they feel physically tired and they just want to sit down, watch a bit of TV and go to sleep, like I did when I done removals years ago. It was the best job I ever had because it was so much fun. And really, if you make it a law that all these thuggish types have to have some sort of employment where they're working at least 5 days a week, maybe even 5.5 days a week or 6 days, they won't get into trouble. And that includes people who are drug addicts. If you can keep them busy, they don't get to think about drugs. And that's why quite a few drug addicts can be working addicts. My neighbour, for instance, she's a drunk. When she's not working, she is continuously smoking and drinking and just sitting there watching TV every night. She won't do anything to change her way. I've suggested many things. She refuses to do any of them. Because these sort of people are selfish and lazy. But that's the thing, you see, like I've said, she's working, let's say till 6 o'clock in the evening, and she never drinks. As soon as she gets home, she's drinking all the way till bedtime. And that's because her mind's busy on something else. And I found when I was younger and I was really, really busy doing something, I didn't have time to eat. I didn't have breakfast, lunch, or dinner. I got around to dinner maybe around 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock at night. By then I was starving because I'd been working hard. The mind has to be occupied. If it gets bored, you're going to start doing negative things. And if you're a teenager, you're going to start doing gangs and things like that. And just remember now, teenagers, not just teenagers, that mindset is where you do something first and then you think about it later. And you only think about it if you get caught. But that mindset goes right up to the age of 25. So it's only when you get to 26 that you become a true adult, if you like. You start thinking of the consequences of your actions first, before you do it. Of course, some people, they get into this thing of doing it as a teenager, whatever they're doing, something negative, like going to football matches and fighting. So it might take much longer to get out of that behaviour. It becomes too much of a habit. It becomes part of their nature. I know one fellow who gave up beating people up at boxing matches, at football matches, when he was 35 years of age. He suddenly realised what an idiot he is. It's funny that people, the governments and that, they don't do what I've just suggested there, keeping people busy, young people. And they don't do it because these people aren't specialists. They're not that knowledgeable. The ones in government, in power, and they get all these jobs at the head of the police, the head of the prisons, etc., head of schools, and they don't really know anything. But you've got to change the nature of these teenagers. You've got to change the nature of them at the very beginning, at the foundation, before they can get into it, basically. Or if they do get into it, instead of when they go to a magistrate's court for something small, and the magistrate says, I'm going to give you another chance, and they sets him free, that's not giving him a chance. He's simply putting him back into the same situation which caused that person to do what they did, break the law. That's not a chance. If he was to force that person into a job, a regular job, and if they stopped going for some reason, they would get arrested. And I don't think locking people up helps at all. It just makes people worse, because you're putting the bad with the bad. And so when you go into a prison situation, people are advising you how to be a better crook, how to be more violent. They're not saying, don't do this and don't do that. They're saying, do it, but better. So it just makes things worse. No, the only thing you can do is show people how to live a normal life through work and saving. And you can even force them to give you so much money every week, and you save it in a bank account for them. And then maybe after 5 years, you give them that money. And that strict control over these teenagers who have caused trouble, that can be there until the age of 26. Yeah, it's like a habit in a way, habit. And you always hear the parents, they say, oh, he's mixing with the wrong group. But that's not true, because if you ask the parents of every single person in that group, they will say the same thing. He's mixing with the wrong persons in that group. They're all wrong persons, everyone in that group. What makes that group? They're all part of the problem. Anyway, I think it's time for a cup of tea for me.